Hello, my name is Jessie Ewing-Frable, and today I'll be presenting my second assignment for Communications 101, which is my persuasive speech. I've chosen the topic of cell phones in the classroom and why I find they are an important tool for students. The title of my presentation, feel free to follow along, I've attached my PowerPoint, is Smartphones in the Classroom, a Pathway to Learning in Secondary Education. First, a little bit about my position and how I chose this topic. Currently working in a classroom with about 12 8th graders who are English language learners. And the other day, a lot of them have cell phones, some of them don't, but the other day I said, hey, feel free to use your Google Translate app on this assignment. I think it'd be really great to get learn some new adjectives. And a student looked at me and said, are you sure, Miss Ewing? We won't get in trouble. And so it kind of made me think about how this is something that I think a lot of teachers don't agree on. And I think that cell phones are, with the appropriate approach to transparency and responsibility with kids and how you approach that conversation, they can be a really great tool. My thesis, my position is that allowing students to use their phones in the classroom helps their organizational skills, engagement, accountability, which improve their overall learning and success. So organization, engagement, and accountability are the 3 points that I'll be talking about in the presentation. To begin, organization. There are so many apps that help kids today to stay organized. In an article with the National Education Association, the NEA, Ken Holla has been a teacher. He was interviewed in an article about cell phone use in the classroom, and it's something he's experimented with a lot in his 22 years of teaching. And he was quoted as saying, I was stunned by how many more kids started doing homework. He says, I just thought that they didn't want to do the work, but it was more that they were unorganized and had forgotten to do it. So that's in response to him implementing an app called Remind 101, which he recommends, which is a fantastic app for students to set their own reminders on their phones, and it's a great way for teachers and parents to communicate, but it's also an alternative to sending emails and giving paperwork to kids, because they can get a message directly when they get home at night that reminds them to do their homework. I think ultimately, when kids are more organized with or able to use certain apps like this, they are able to remember to complete their homework, which means they're coming to school more prepared. So Remind Me 101 is an app, My Homework Student Planner, and then Poll Everywhere is a survey oriented app, but there's a lot of different types of things you can use it for. So I was going to show you really quick an app, and I'll pull it up on my desktop. This would be the perspective of a teacher. So if kids have Poll Everywhere, it's a fantastic free app. This is kind of what it looks like. So these are some of the different subjects. So basically, teachers are able to decide how they want to survey their students, the medium. So they could do a survey, they could do a word diagram, they could do a questionnaire, a true or false, or an open-ended panel discussion. There are so many modes and ways that teachers can conduct and get information from their students. And it's used by a lot of universities and a lot of school districts at the secondary level. And so I think that it's a fantastic tool for organization. Moving right along, engagement. Howard Gardner is a psychologist and the author of a couple books. One is The App Generation, and the other is Multiple Intelligences. And he was interviewed by the Washington Post and talked about his definitions of intelligence versus style, which are fascinating in terms of a conversation about technology and allowing kids to use it. He argues that we spend a lot of time talking about learning styles And he challenges us to think more about styles as a student's approach to learning and an intelligence as an ability. And so he encourages teachers to think about how they can individualize their teaching to students, pluralize, so how they can teach in different ways, and how they can eliminate the emphasis of the learning style with kids, and focus more on figuring out what specific intelligences kids possess, what their strengths are. And he says, instead of one size fits all, this is also in my PowerPoint, but I thought this quote was absolutely fascinating. Instead of one size fits all, learn as much as you can about each student and teach each person in ways that they find comfortable and learn effectively. Of course, this is easier to accomplish with smaller groups or classes, but apps make it possible to individualize for everyone. And that is in the article in the Washington Post. He shared that. So basically, when you are, for example, an example of how to pluralize or individualize would be using the poll app in your classroom, because what you're doing there is you're evaluating what different students, their strengths, their intelligences, and you're able to kind of step back and reflect and see the results of the poll and figure out what different kids, what their abilities are, and then from there you can think more about how they approach their learning and what their styles might be. So polls are a fantastic way to do that, and kids can pull out an app and vote, and it's also anonymous. So there's they're not wondering whether or not their answer is going to be shared if they're unsure. So it kind of makes it a little bit more discreet for them as well. Accountability is a really important thing when you talk about cell phones in classrooms, and it can be defined by Merriam-Webster's dictionary as the obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. And I think the main concern, which is completely understandable with when you have kids, allow kids to use phones in the classroom, is the idea that they would be irresponsible and that phones would be a distraction. And I think I totally understand that perspective, but I feel that when you're transparent with your students about the rules, and when you are able to say, this is an appropriate time for your phones, please get onto this app, or let's please look up this together right now, see if you can find an answer using this database app. When they are clear about the rules, they have a sense of accountability and are able to have the opportunity to build their accountability and their ownership. And they know, wow, okay, here's my chance to be responsible. And I think when they are able to feel trusted and responsible, that ultimately is empowering, and it builds confidence, and more learning takes place because of it. So I would argue that when kids are clear about the expectations and the consequences if their phones are out for inappropriate reasons, then ultimately they can be a great tool for kids. And then a quote from Edward Graham from an article in the National Education Association. By holding students accountable for their work and responsible for maintaining a personal level of excellence, teachers can provide their classes with the necessary tools they need to better themselves. So that kind of is a great conclusion to what I just addressed in terms of responsibility and how phones can be a great tool if you're transparent about what you expect from them, and what accountability is. It can be a great learning tool. So just to review, organizational tools, engagement, and accountability can all be improved when a teacher allows students to use their phones in particular lessons. And I think that those skills can help kids be more successful in their learning. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.